My brother told the police I stole $47,000 from our parents. He was the one who did it. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "Admit it or I'm calling the cops and telling them you drained mom and dad's account." I said, "Go ahead. Just make sure they arrest the right person." My parents sat there and said nothing. That silence is the whole story, really. That silence is why I'm telling you this. I'm Nate. I'm 34, I live in Denver, and I've been financially on my own since I was 18. Not completely. There was a rough patch in college where I lived on instant noodles and my mom occasionally mailed me a box of granola bars like I was at summer camp. But I paid my own tuition, worked the front desk at a tax office through school, and walked out with a degree and zero debt to my parents. I built a career in forensic accounting. I trace money for a living. I find out where it went, who moved it, and when. I did not expect to one day use those exact skills to keep myself out of prison. My younger brother Colin is 3 years behind me, and Colin has always been the kind of person who walks into a room and becomes the main character of it without trying. Charming, funny, good-looking, quick with a joke. He sells medical equipment for a living and makes decent money at it. If you met him at a cookout, you'd like him. Everybody does. Growing up, Colin was the favorite, and I say that as a fact, not a grudge. My mom, Karen, is a retired elementary school teacher, warm, generous, the kind of woman who remembers everyone's birthday. But she has a blind spot for Colin the size of a football field. He was the baby. He needed more help, more patience, more forgiveness. I was the one who just handled things, so everyone assumed I didn't need anything at all. My dad, Frank, retired from the county water department, loves us both, genuinely. But in 38 years of marriage, he has never once overruled my mother on anything involving the family. If mom says the sky is green, dad starts looking for a can of paint. We are not a loud family. Nobody throws plates. Nobody screams. We're worse than that. We let things rot quietly under the surface, smiling the whole time because everything's fine is basically our family motto, printed on an imaginary coat of arms. For years I kept a comfortable distance. Holidays, a phone call every couple of weeks, birthday cards on time. Not estranged, just separate. I have my own townhouse, my own yard, a stable job, a couple of close friends. Nothing glamorous. Mine though. Colin, meanwhile, had been circling something for a while and nobody wanted to look at it directly. He married Brooke 4 years ago. She does part-time social media work for a boutique downtown and has expensive taste on a budget that does not remotely support it. Last year they redid their kitchen, full granite, the works. Colin drives a leased Audi. They took an anniversary cruise to the Bahamas. From the outside, their life looked like a lifestyle magazine spread. I know what medical device reps make. It's good money. It is not granite countertops plus Audi plus cruise money. Not without help. But I minded my business. That's the family rule. Don't ask, don't tell, don't notice. Last Thanksgiving, Colin showed up wearing a new watch. I don't know brands, but I know enough to recognize when something isn't a $20 Timex. My mom complimented it. Brooke said something about how Colin deserved nice things. Nobody asked where the money came from. I ate my turkey and kept quiet, same as always. That's the ecosystem I grew up in. One where a certain person's spending never gets questioned and another person's silence gets mistaken for indifference. The trouble started about 4 months ago on a Tuesday night when my dad called me. That alone should have told me something was wrong. My dad doesn't call. My dad answers calls. Calling is mom's department. "Hey bud," he said, and there was something careful in his voice, like a man walking across a floor he wasn't sure would hold his weight. "Got kind of a financial question for you." "Okay." "When you were here for Easter, did you use the computer in the den? Check email or anything?" "Yeah, for like 10 minutes. "Why?" Long pause. "Your mother noticed some money's gone missing from one of the accounts. We're just trying to figure out the timeline." "How much money?" "About $6,200. I sat there for a second, letting that land. "Dad, are you asking me if I took $6,200 out of your bank account?" No, he said quickly, too quickly. We're trying to trace it." Colin thought maybe. Colin thought what? He said you'd asked him some questions about the account, how the online banking worked. He was just trying to help us figure it out. I told my dad calmly that I had never asked Colin a single question about their banking. I hadn't touched any account. I had no idea what he was talking about. He said okay, said he believed me, said it was probably a bank error and they'd get it sorted. I hung up and sat in my kitchen for 10 minutes replaying the call. It wasn't just the accusation that bothered me. It was the framing. Colin thought maybe. Colin was trying to help trace it. Colin was already inside the story before I even knew there was a story. I almost called him right then to ask what the hell he was talking about. Something told me to wait. 2 weeks later I was at my desk on a Wednesday morning, reviewing a client's quarterly filings, when my phone rang from a local unknown number. Is this Nathan Reyes? Speaking. Mr. Reyes, this is Detective Alan Renner with the Denver Police Department. I'm calling about a theft report that's been filed, and your name has come up in connection with it. I'd like to ask you a few questions. Would you be able to come in this week? I felt the floor tilt a little. Can you tell me who filed the report? I can tell you it involves a complaint from a family member regarding unauthorized access to a financial account. I'd rather go over specifics in person. I told him I'd come in. I hung up, closed my office door, and stared at the wall for a solid 3 minutes. My coworker Monica knocked and stuck her head in. She's a senior partner at the firm, sharp, doesn't miss much, doesn't say much either. You look like someone just read you your rights, she said. Funny you should say that. She stepped in, shut the door, and I gave her the short version. She listened without interrupting, which I've always respected about her. You need to walk in there with a plan, she said. Not just an explanation. I know. I probably need a lawyer too. You definitely need a lawyer. She left, and I sat there thinking about how my little brother, the one I taught to ride a bike, the one I drove to prom because he'd wrecked his own car the week before and our parents couldn't afford to fix it in time, had somehow maneuvered me into needing a criminal defense attorney. Then I pulled out my laptop and started doing the thing I do for a living. I just didn't know yet how deep this actually went. At first I thought it was a misunderstanding. That belief lasted exactly until I sat down across from a detective in an interview room that smelled like burnt coffee and old carpet. Detective Renner turned out to be a stocky guy in his 40s, calm, unhurried, the kind of demeanor that makes you nervous precisely because he isn't. He offered me coffee and opened a folder. Here's what I've got. Your parents, Frank and Karen Reyes, reported approximately $6,200 transferred from a joint checking account without authorization. The report was filed by your brother, Colin Reyes, on their behalf. On their behalf, I repeated. He came in personally. Sat right where you're sitting. Said you had access to the household computer during a recent visit, that you'd asked questions about their banking setup, and that unauthorized transfers began shortly after. That match your recollection. None of that is true. He looked at me steady. I'm giving you the chance to tell me your side. So I did. I told him about the 10 minutes checking email at Easter. I told him I'd never discussed their banking with Colin or anyone. I told him what I do for a living, and that got a small flicker of his eyebrows. Forensic accounting, he said. Yeah. So I can tell you right now, if you pull the IP logs on those transactions, they are not going to trace back to any device I own or any network I've ever used. That's helpful. We're still early. I'll be in touch. I sat in my car in the station parking lot for 15 minutes afterward. My hands weren't shaking, but they wanted to. The thing looping in my head wasn't even the accusation. It was that Colin had walked into a police station and formally, on the record, lied about me. That's not a family misunderstanding. That's a decision. I called my mom that night. Mom, did you and Dad file a police report against me? Long pause. Colin handled it. He was worried. He said it was just to create a paper trail in case the bank needed one. A paper trail that says I stole from you. Nobody's saying you stole anything, honey. Colin panicked. You know how he gets. He told a detective I asked him about your banking login. That never happened. Maybe he got confused. Maybe he misremembered. Mom. He sat in a police station and gave a formal statement. People don't misremember that. Silence. Then, in the tone I think she genuinely believed would fix everything, Nate, please don't ruin the family over one mistake. He panicked. That's all. I didn't argue. There was nothing left to argue. She'd already decided the story, and in her version Colin was a well-meaning son who got a little carried away, and I was overreacting. That should have been the end of it, at least in a normal family. Unfortunately, it wasn't. Here's where the forensic accountant stops being a fun detail about my job and starts being the actual plot. I requested a copy of the police report through public records. When it came in, I read it 3 times. Colin's statement wasn't vague, it was specific to the point of being rehearsed. A conversation he claimed we'd had in the kitchen on Easter, about the account number, about whether the banking used two-factor authentication. Dates. Amounts. But buried in a supplemental section, one I don't think he realized would be visible, was a reference to a total suspected loss of approximately $47,000. I read that number 4 times. $47,000. My parents are comfortable, not wealthy. My dad's pension and my mom's modest retirement savings are their entire safety net. $47,000 is not a hiccup for them. It's catastrophic. And Colin had reported 6,200. Not 47,000. Why? Because he didn't want anyone looking closely at the other 40,000. Because 6,200 was the one withdrawal big enough and recent enough that my dad had actually noticed it on a statement. The rest had been bleeding out quietly in smaller pieces for a long time. I didn't have access to my parents' bank records, and I knew they wouldn't hand them over to me, not with Colin whispering in their ear that I was the problem. But I knew who eventually would have to produce them, the bank itself. I called Monica. I need a recommendation for a criminal defense attorney. Not for a client. For me. She didn't gasp, didn't ask 20 questions. I'll send you 3 names tonight. I went with a woman named Patricia Voss, mid-50s, former prosecutor, zero patience for nonsense. In our first meeting I laid everything out. If the detective does his job, she said, the bank records will tell the whole story. But we are not going to sit around hoping he does his job. We're going to make sure the right records get preserved. She sent a preservation letter that week. A legal hold on every transaction tied to my parents' accounts going back 3 years. She also filed a formal response denying every claim in Colin's statement and requesting IP verification and device tracing on all flagged transactions. Meanwhile, I did something I'm not proud of, and would do again without hesitation. I went back through my own records, emails, texts, calendar entries, and built a full timeline of every visit to my parents' house over the past 3 years. Dates, times, purpose. Then I cross-referenced it against my work travel. Flights, hotel bookings, client meetings. For 9 of the flagged transaction dates, I was verifiably in a different state entirely. I sat at my kitchen table at 1 in the morning looking at a spreadsheet that proved, in cold black and white, that my brother had lied to the police to cover up years of stealing from our own parents. And the part that sat in my chest like a brick wasn't even that. It was knowing my parents were going to fight me on this. Not because the evidence was unclear, but because accepting it meant accepting what Colin actually was, and they weren't built for that. I backed the spreadsheet up to 2 separate drives and went to bed because what came next was going to require patience, and patience requires sleep. The next 6 weeks were the hardest stretch of my adult life, and not because anything dramatic happened. The opposite. Nothing happened on purpose. Patricia's advice was simple: be boring. Don't confront Colin. Don't have emotional conversations with my parents. Don't post anything online. Don't do anything that could later be spun as retaliatory or unstable. You're building a case file, she told me. The best case files come from people who look completely calm on the outside. So that's what I did. Work, home, dishes, lawn, Thursday night basketball. And in the quiet hours, I built the most thorough financial reconstruction of my career, with Monica quietly helping. Not officially, nothing legal, but she'd done forensic work for 20 years and knew things I didn't. Clean documentation. Clear sourcing. No gaps. You're treating this like a client case, she said one night, watching me work. It's the only way I know how to survive it. You doing okay? No. But I'm doing this. Here's what I pieced together. 3 years ago, my mom had added Colin to a joint checking account tied to their retirement savings, in case of a medical emergency, after my dad's diabetes diagnosis scared her. She hadn't added me. I wasn't hurt by that. He lives 2 streets over from them, I live across town. It made logistical sense. What didn't make sense was the pattern that started about 4 months after he was added. Smart withdrawals. Most under $1,000, some structured into round numbers like 500 or 800, easy to mistake for normal household transfers if nobody was looking closely. Some were routed through what looked like vendor payments, but traced back to Colin's own credit card accounts. Money moved from the joint account to an intermediary, then used to pay down his Audi lease or his Visa balance. Over 34 months, it added up to roughly $47,000. My parents never caught it because my mom didn't check the account regularly and my dad left the finances entirely to her. The $6,200 withdrawal that finally got noticed was just bigger than his usual amount. He'd gotten desperate or sloppy, probably both. And when it surfaced, he didn't confess. He pointed at me. Getting the actual bank records to confirm all this took time. Patricia's preservation letter kept them from being purged, but full access needed either my parents' cooperation, which wasn't happening, or the ongoing police investigation. Detective Renner, to his credit, was doing his job, requesting records from the bank's fraud department, which was cooperating but slowly. Every few weeks, another piece landed. Transaction logs. IP records. Device identifiers. Each one confirmed what I already knew. Meanwhile, I played my part. Sunday calls with my mom kept deliberately light. Her garden, dad's blood sugar, nothing heavier. She was clearly relieved I wasn't making a thing of it, as she put it once. I could hear the tension drain out of her voice every time I didn't bring up Colin or the report. She wanted to believe silence meant resolution. One Sunday she was in a great mood because she'd won a pie contest at church. Blueberry, apparently the secret was a little bit of love and a whole lot of lemon zest. I actually laughed. Normal mother-son stuff. Then, right before hanging up, she added, Colin and Brooke are thinking about having a baby. Wouldn't that be wonderful? It would be wonderful, I said, because what else do you say? I hung up and sat there thinking about my brother bringing a kid into a house built on money stolen from that kid's own grandparents, and my mother already daydreaming about booties instead of looking at a bank statement. Colin texted me twice during this stretch. A football highlight link. A photo of a steak he'd grilled, getting good at this. Just a guy being a guy, nothing to see here. I didn't respond to either one. He didn't follow up. That told me everything about how much he actually cared about our relationship versus how much he cared about the appearance of one. At work, I threw myself into client cases with an intensity that probably worried a few coworkers. There's something grounding about untangling someone else's financial mess while your own life is quietly falling apart. About 5 weeks in, Patricia called on a Thursday evening. The bank records are in. Renner's reviewing them, but I got an early look through Discovery. Every flagged transaction traces to a device registered to Colin. IP addresses match his home network, some his cell connection. Your name doesn't appear anywhere in the access logs. Your devices have never even been authenticated on that account. I sat down on my couch and pressed my fingers into my eyes. This was exactly what I'd expected, what I'd built the whole reconstruction around. But hearing it confirmed out loud landed differently than suspecting it alone at my kitchen table. There's something else, she said. Several of the larger transfers happened on dates you were traveling for work. Renner's already flagged the inconsistency himself. So what happens now? Now we let him finish his report and consult the prosecutor's office. We wait for the right moment to hand over your full analysis. How long? Weeks, not months. Be patient. I was patient right up until Colin called, sounding warm and casual and completely unbothered. A man who genuinely believed his lie had worked. Hey man, so Mom and Dad's anniversary is coming up. 40 years. Brooke and I are putting together a dinner at that Italian place on 5th, the one with the patio. Saturday night. Nothing huge, just the 6 of us. Mom really wants you there. A pause, then, with the practiced ease of someone who's been running from his own messes his whole life. I know things have been a little weird lately. Let's just put it behind us. Fresh start, you know? Fresh start. Like he hadn't walked into a police station and called me a thief. Like fresh start was something he could just hand out instead of accountability. Sure, I said. Saturday works. I hung up and called Patricia immediately. I need this done before Saturday. 4 days. We met at her office Tuesday evening. She spread the whole case file across her conference table. Bank records, IP logs, device authentication histories, my travel timeline, the original police report, my reconstruction. It covered most of the table. Detective Renner already has enough to move the investigation off you entirely, she said. He's told my office informally you're no longer considered a suspect. But the formal process takes time, and he hasn't moved on your brother yet because the fraud department is still verifying records. Can we push that along? We don't need to push. We need to hand him your complete analysis. The piece that connects every withdrawal to Colin's devices, cross-references the dates you were out of state, and identifies the intermediary accounts he used to route money to his own credit lines. That's what turns this from suspicious activity into a documented pattern of fraud. She tapped the stack. I'll deliver it to Renner tomorrow morning with a formal request to dismiss the charges against you and redirect the investigation. And if he says he needs more time? He won't. This is cleaner work than his department usually gets handed from outside counsel. You did his job for him, Nate. He'll be grateful. I went home and didn't sleep well. Not from nerves about the evidence which I'd verified twice over, but because I knew what came next was going to blow my family apart, and no spreadsheet makes that feel good. I lay there thinking randomly about Christmas when I was 12 and Colin was 9. He'd wanted some expensive remote control car our parents couldn't afford, and I'd spent a whole summer of lawn mowing money to buy it for him. He played with that thing for 2 months straight, told all his friends his big brother got it for him. I don't know why that memory surfaced at 2 in the morning. It just sat there in the dark with me until I fell asleep. Wednesday, Patricia delivered the file. She called at noon. He's reviewing it now. Asked me twice if you'd put this together yourself. I told him you do this for a living and he said, Paraphrasing, that this is the most organized case referral he's gotten from a civilian in his career. So what's next? He finishes review, consults the prosecutor, and based on what he's seeing, I expect he'll want to talk to Colin before Saturday. I can't guarantee timing on his end. But regardless of what happens by Saturday, you're clear. The evidence exonerates you completely. Everything from here is about Colin. That should have felt like pure relief, and part of me registered it that way. But most of me was picturing my parents sitting across from Colin at that restaurant Saturday night, celebrating 40 years of marriage, with no idea that one son had been stealing from them for 3 years and the other had just handed the police proof of it. Thursday was quiet. I worked, kept my phone face down. Monica stopped by around lunch. You're grinding your teeth again. I'm not. You've been doing it since I walked in. Your jaw's locked up like a vault. She sat down. How's the thing in motion? You want to talk about it? Not really. But I appreciate you asking. She studied me. You're allowed to be angry about this, Nate. You don't have to process it like a case file. It's the only way I know how. I know. That's why I said it. She stood to leave. Go easy on the jaw. Dental work's expensive. Friday afternoon, Patricia texted. Renner's reviewed the full file. He has questions, but they're clarifying, not skeptical. He's moving forward. That night I sat in my townhouse and asked myself, honestly, what I actually wanted. Not strategically, the strategic part was already finished. I wanted to be cleared. That was happening. I wanted Colin to face consequences. That was in motion. But what did I want with my parents? With the version of my family that had looked at both of us and, without a shred of evidence, decided I was the more likely thief? I didn't have a clean answer. I still don't, honestly. Friday morning my phone rang. Detective Renner. I've completed my review, Mr. Reyes. I'd like you to come in this afternoon if you're available. Not as a suspect, I want to be clear about that. I just need to confirm a few details in your analysis before I take next steps. I went. Same station, same interview room, same burnt coffee smell. But this time the folder on the table was mine. Renner had a coffee and a pair of reading glasses I hadn't seen before. He'd clearly been at this a while. I'll be honest with you, he said. I've done this job 16 years, and I don't often get handed a case file from the accused that's more thorough than what my own department would produce. I wasn't exactly the accused, technically. A small nod. Fair enough. He walked me through the transaction timeline, pulling up specific dates and amounts, and I confirmed how I'd traced each one. Device ID matching, IP geolocation, the intermediary account structures, my corresponding travel records. Halfway through he leaned back. You do this for a living. I do. How long? About 9 years. He nodded slowly at the file, then flipped to the section on the joint account, the one my mother added Colin to. Your brother's the joint holder on this account? Yes. Your mother added him voluntarily? As far as I know, yeah. She told me it was in case my dad had a medical emergency. Renner closed the folder. Not dramatically, just the way someone does when they've seen enough to know their next move. I need to make some calls. I stood, we shook hands, and he didn't tell me what those calls would be. I didn't ask. I sat in my car in the parking lot afterward, staring through the windshield, still not sure if I was going to that anniversary dinner tomorrow. My phone buzzed. A text from Colin. Reservations at 7. Brooke says we're something nice. Hello. See you there, brother. I read it twice, set the phone down, and drove home. I went to the dinner. I know some of you are yelling at your screen right now, but here's why. I didn't go for Colin, and honestly, I didn't even go for my mom. I went because my parents had been married 40 years, and my dad, who never asked to be caught in the middle of any of this, deserved one more evening with both his sons at the table, even if it turned out to be the last one. The restaurant was nice. White tablecloths, candles, a patio over the river. Brooke was already there, fussing with a little bouquet she'd brought as a centerpiece. She looked up and gave me a smile that somehow managed to be welcoming and territorial at the same time. Nate, you came. Wouldn't miss it. Colin stood and shook my hand, firm grip, direct eye contact, easy smile. If I didn't know what I knew, I'd have sworn he was genuinely glad to see me. My parents arrived a few minutes later. Mom hugged me tight and I could feel the relief in it. Relief that I'd shown up, that I wasn't making a scene, that the family was performing normal on schedule. Dad clapped my shoulder. Good to see you, bud. We ordered. We ate. We talked about Dad's garden, Brooke's new client, a trip to the coast my parents were planning. Colin told a story about a sales conference that had the whole table laughing. Charming, self-deprecating, the star of the table, same as always. I watched him work the room and thought about the backup drive sitting in a drawer at my house. At one point during dessert, my mom reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm so glad we're all together," she said, eyes wet. "This is what matters." I squeezed back. I didn't say anything. We said our goodbyes in the parking lot around 9. I hugged my dad. I hugged my mom. I shook Colin's hand again. And I drove home already knowing it was the last time the 6 of us would ever sit at a table together like that. Monday morning, Detective Renner called Colin in for a follow-up interview. I only know what happened because it eventually became part of the record. Colin walked in confident. Why wouldn't he? As far as he knew, the investigation was still pointed squarely at me. Renner asked him to walk through his original statement again, the kitchen conversation, the banking questions, the timeline. Colin repeated it, word for word consistent with the first version. Rehearsed. Then Renner opened my file. Showed him the IP logs. The device authentication records. The intermediary account routing. The 9 dates where I was verifiably in another state entirely. Colin's attorney, he'd brought one this time, which tells you he wasn't nearly as confident as he'd looked at dinner, asked for a break. 20 minutes later they came back, and his attorney said his client wouldn't be answering further questions. By Wednesday, the prosecutor's office had opened a formal investigation into Colin for theft and filing a false police report. The complaint against me was officially closed. Patricia called with the news and I sat in my office with the door shut, feeling something I can only describe as hollow relief, like winning a game you never wanted to be forced to play. I called my mom that evening. She already knew. Colin had called her first, obviously. "Nate," her voice was shaking, "Colin says there's been a misunderstanding with the police." "Mom, it's not a misunderstanding. He says the account was joint. He had a right to use it, emergency access. He used it to pay his own credit card bills. For 3 years. $47,000. Silence. A long one. That can't be right. I've seen the records, Mom. Every transaction. Every date. Every dollar. He's been draining your retirement account. And when Dad noticed the big withdrawal, Colin told you it was me." She started crying, not the loud kind, the quiet, gutted kind, the sound of someone's entire understanding of her own family rearranging itself in real time and nothing fitting where it used to. "Why didn't you tell us?" she whispered. "Because you wouldn't have believed me. You told me not to ruin the family over one mistake. Remember?" She didn't answer. I could hear my dad in the background asking what was wrong, and she couldn't get the words out. "Mom, I have to go. I'm sorry this happened. I never wanted any of it. And I meant that." Over the following weeks, things unraveled the way things do once the truth finally gets loose. Colin hired a real defense attorney this time, not the one he'd brought to the police interview. Brooke found out the full scope of it right around when the legal bill started, and Colin couldn't hide it anymore. I heard through my dad there were a lot of doors slamming in that house. My parents went into the bank and sat through a meeting where the fraud department walked them through every unauthorized withdrawal line by line. My mom cried through the entire thing. My dad barely said a word, which is how he processes everything, but somehow it felt worse this time. Colin called me once about 3 weeks in. I almost didn't pick up. "You couldn't have just let it go," he said. No real anger in it. More bafflement, like he genuinely couldn't understand why I hadn't just quietly accepted being the scapegoat. "You filed a police report saying I stole from our parents. I almost got arrested at my own office. I was going to pay it back. You were going to pay back $47,000. Eventually. Yeah. I had a plan. Your plan was me. I was the plan." He didn't have anything to say to that. We sat in silence for about 10 seconds. Then he hung up. The legal process played out over the following months. Because the account was technically joint, the theft charge got complicated. His attorney argued he'd had legal access. But the false report charge was airtight. He'd lied to police about me in detail on the record. No ambiguity there. He eventually took a plea, misdemeanor theft, probation, restitution, plus community service, and a conviction on his record for the false report. Patricia called it a reasonable outcome. I told her I cared less about the legal result than about the record finally being corrected. My parents and I still have a relationship, but it's different now. Smaller. More honest than it used to be, which also makes it more painful in a different way. My mom calls every week, asks about my work, my house, my life. She doesn't bring up Colin unless I ask, and I don't ask often. When I do, her answers are careful and measured. She's in therapy now. So is my dad, which honestly surprised me. About 4 months after everything settled, my dad called me on a Tuesday night, same kind of call that started all of this. "Hey bud." "Hey dad." I owe you an apology. A real one. Not the kind where I say something vague and hope you fill in the blanks. He paused and I could hear him organizing his thoughts, careful, one piece at a time, the way he used to sort mail routes. I should have asked harder questions when that money went missing. I should have known you better than to think you'd ever steal from us. And when you told me it wasn't you, I should have fought for you instead of letting your mother smooth it over. I failed you as a father. I'm sorry. I stood in my kitchen with the phone against my ear and felt something loosen in my chest that had been tight for months. Thanks, Dad. That means a lot. You want to come over for dinner this weekend? Just us. No agenda. Meatloaf. Yeah. I'd like that. Colin and Brooke separated not long after. Last I heard they're trying to work through it. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. That's their story now, not mine. Colin's paying restitution in monthly installments. My parents' account won't ever fully recover, but it won't be empty either. Small mercies. As for me, I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. I still wake up in my townhouse, still go to work, still come home and water the yard. I've started seeing someone new, nothing serious yet, but she makes me laugh and I'd honestly forgotten I needed that. Monica told me recently I seem lighter. I think she's right. I didn't blow up my family. My brother did that. I just followed the money. That's what I do. AITA for proving my brother lied to the police about stealing from our parents, even though it tore my family apart?